Welcome to Up Your Game from the Chicago Curling Club Rookies. I'm Matt, and I look forward to talking to you today about sweeping techniques, and advanced sweeping techniques for directional sweeping. Da 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 da. All right. So in curling, there are two sweepers on every stone, or at least two sweepers available for sweeping every stone. Let's begin with the basics. In order to sweep, you need to have a broom. So make sure you have a broom, get it at the club. You need to know how to hold the broom. So, when we first learn, it's easy to grab a broom, but what's the most best place to hold the broom? Typically, if you divide it into thirds and then you put your hands at each one of the third demarcations, that's where you want to hold the broom. Now, certainly experiment with what works best for your body and how you mechanically sweep. Let's talk about the critical things about brooms. So here's your equipment. You know how to hold it. For those new rookie curlers and every curler really, it's important to know your equipment. And broom heads start out being really pristine. They're nice and scratchy. If you put it against your face, you can almost feel how rough they are. It looks clean and good. As you start to use them, 10, 15 games into it, they start to get pretty worn. I think about replacing it. And if they get into, 20 games or so, if you look closely, you can start to see a lot of fur building up. This is soft, and once it becomes soft and smooth, really the broom head isn't scratching anything anymore and helping you make shots. So always take care of your equipment. Newer equipment will certainly work better and be more effective for you on the ice. So sweeping. What's most important? There are really four critical factors to sweeping. The first one, make sure your broom is in front of the rock. Brooms that don't sweep in front of rocks really don't influence the rocks, but it gives you a good workout. The second most important thing, speed. So, how fast you are moving your broom head across the ice will influence the rock. The number three most important factor, pressure. So, the more pressure you can put on the broom, the more you can affect the stone. And the fourth critical factor is the direction. So the angle that your broom is sweeping in front of the rock fast and hard, that angle can actually help affect, especially when you get into directional sweeping. A little side note, if you don't believe in directional sweeping, and as a rookie, you start to listen to all of the conversations and you hear different folks saying, I don't know if I believe in directional sweeping. I do this test at your next practice. Throw a rock with no handle and then sweep it using the directional techniques you'll learn today, and see how much you can affect that rock. And if you're not a believer in directional sweeping after that, then by all means, don't believe in it. Here are some things that I've heard just in interviews and talking to folks. So the average sweeper can sweep effectively for about 7 to maybe 10 seconds on the ice. Now, clearly, if you're a professional curler and you're working out all the time, that you can probably sweep the full distance. But if you think about the normal draw shot, usually takes about 24 seconds to tee line. You got 3 to 4 seconds for your release. It really means that skips out there, when you call sweep, you really only have about effective sweeping for a third of the ice, maybe half of the ice. So if you have a call for sweeping a rock all the way down, you're going to burn out your sweepers. So think about those folks. Since you do have two, there's always an inside sweeper and the second sweeper. The inside sweeper, the one closest to the stone, is the one who can have the most effect on the stone. And I've heard different percentages, but it's somewhere 80 to 90% of the effect sweepers have on the stone is attributed to the sweeper closest to the stone. So keep that in mind as you're sweeping and using those techniques, making sure your brush is in front, sweeping fast and hard and at the right angle for the effect that you want to have on the stone. Today, we're not going to get into whether it's scratching or melting the ice. I think as I keep on thinking about it, either way doesn't really affect the techniques that are being used in the directional sweeping. It all comes down to some of the foundational parts. And I think the biggest important part to understand in the beginning is how ice is made and why the rock is curling. So the first dynamic is the stone itself. So the stone is about 12 inches plus wide, but the running band, what touches the ice, is only about 8 to 9 inches wide. And so be thinking about that when you're sweeping and how stones are affected. Um, I just saw this. We'll give you a better. So 8 to 9 inches, the running bands. So this is what's touching the ice. Second, when the ice maker makes the ice, you start with flat ice. Now, here's an important theory I want to throw out. So anybody who's played arena ice or had to deal with a run or a little bump in the ice, they understand how much uneven ice will affect the curl of the stone, even much more than any kind of sweeping. So imagine if you didn't have flat ice, but it was flat and then it fell to the side. It really wouldn't matter, doesn't matter as much on your sweeping. The rock will actually follow the trajectory of gravity. So gravity wins. That happens a lot in life. This is an important topic and to think about sweeping. And I'll put this out here for you. So ice starts out in an ideal fashion, very flat. Then the ice maker will pebble the ice. So you get these hills across the ice. And then the pebbler or the ice maker will actually use the nipper and they take off the top part. But anybody who's used a razor and shaved knows that you never get a perfect shave. It means you have some jagged leftover edges. So even though the nipper tried to get it pretty straight, there's still little jagged parts to the ice. It's attributable to why a freshly pebbled and prepared sheet runs slower. It doesn't speed up until you've thrown a couple of rocks over it, and it's actually knocked down those little uneven edges. So, if we think back to the uneven portion of the ice, the gravity affects the ice. Then the sweeping, one of the major tactics, whether you're a scratcher camp, meaning that by sweeping you create scratches in the ice that can affect a stone, or if you are a melter um, camp. So you believe that sweeping the stone melts the ice, or pressure, you're just breaking it down. In either case, if we think about sweeping in front of the rock, we are we are actually just taking a little bit of ice off here so that this ice, the swept portion of the ice, is a little lower than the non-swept portion. And if you're doing that, in effect, what you're creating is a trench in the ice, a very, very narrow or thin trench. But the more effective you can be at creating that trench, you can actually affect the rock because the rock will naturally want to go to the lowest point or follow that trench. So this is why it's important to sweep in front of the rock. And if we're directional sweeping, I think one of the recommended things in directional sweeping that I want you to think about is you want to sweep on the two-thirds to 3/4 of the outside edge. So that into that first sweeper, any direction, you want to sweep in the direction that you're trying to promote. So if the rock is curling, you want to be on the inside where the rock is curling. You want to be on the inner 2/3 and 3/4 portion of the rock. If you want to hold the line, you're on the outside edge, 2/3, 3/4 of the rock. Why? Well, if the band is only 7 to 8 inches, and if you can depress the ice 2/3 of the stone, what you're really doing is you're creating a trench and using gravity, scratching, melting the ice in order to promote the rock on that curling line that you want, or to hold the rock, and using gravity and the rock fighting the height differential of the pebble in order to manipulate the curl of the stone. All right. So with that, what are the specific techniques? So in general, the angle, the fourth most important part, right? It's usually divided into 90 degrees and can fall into one of four categories. You're either going to be on a 45-degree angle sweeping this way, you're going to be on a 45-degree angle sweeping this way, or I'm sorry, 90-degree angle. You're going to be on a 90-degree angle sweeping this way, or a 90-degree angle sweeping this way. Let's talk stones. So we have a stone. We are throwing it clockwise rotation. Once it leaves the hog line, the release point, this stone without affected by different releases should just have a nice little profile like this on generally called 4-foot curl of ice. So if you are sweeping in either of these, either snowplow, which would be right in front, or across the face of the rock trajectory should be elongated, meaning you should hold that rock's line before it starts to curl, and it'll go further, but it won't quite curl as much. The other way, again, if it's curling clockwise and you want to hold the line and you sweep it this way, so you're closest to the stone and you're on the 2/3 edge of the outside edge of the rock, and you're either scratching or depressing the ice such that the rock line is going to be held and dragged out. If you're really, really good, it should go out a little bit further. Again, probably not quite curl quite as much. Then, if you want to really augment the curl, you sweep across the stone, and you are sweeping on this side 2/3 at a 90-degree angle, 6 inches in front of the rock, or as tight as you can be, and you are scratching or depressing the ice so that you augment the curl. And in this case, the trajectory should be break earlier, and it should curl a little bit more. So that's the natural effect of the different techniques. Again, you have to be in front of the rock, ideally 2/3 to 3/4 of the rock in the direction that you want to influence, and speed, pressure, and then now we're talking about the angle of the rock. So the one of the last points I want to make is for advanced curling techniques, and what we've seen, if you take a look at the Scottish, Swedish teams and some of the Canadian teams, they're starting to employ some interesting techniques. The Swedish team, oftentimes on a draw, they may put a brush down to clean it, but they'll put pressure on it and just be kind of tracing the rock's trajectory all the way down. One, they're right there, Johnny on the spot, able to sweep the stone if a sweep call is necessary, and clears any of the debris. One side note on making sure that you sweep and debris on the stone. It is absolutely critical. I see this in games where somebody's sweeping in front of the rock, and instead of the correct motion would be when you call up, is to push the broom outside of the draw path and then lift up your broom head off of the ice. I see a lot of people who will sweep in front of the rock, and when they're called off, they just lift their broom straight up. Well, any debris that's on the broom head that happens to fall off will fall in front of the rock and you'll see it burn. So be aware of that. Make sure you're clearing your broom head in front of the path when you take it off of the ice. Very important critique. Some of the advanced skills. So what I'm starting to see, we all see Gushu's team does it, Botcher's team does it. The Scottish team they are a real believer in this. And I spoke to an Olympic coach for the techniques about how do you really augment the rock. And what you're starting to see is some of these advanced skills you are seeing um, in front of this stone, again, we'll go ahead and use a clockwise curl. So if you really want to make this curl, instead of using the horizontal or using the full length of the broom to create it, what you're seeing is they're using a vertical spin. So they're taking and turning the broom this way and sweeping back and forth. And what they do is they're changing the direction. If you watch very closely, they start out at a much higher angle and then they work the stone and the broom until they get to that 90-degree angle. So what they're trying to do is they're saying, hey, I wanna curl. Again, hit 2/3 of the curling edge. So it would be this side of the rock. And you want to be a little steeper and you'll go like this for a couple strokes to get the rock's attention is what I was told. And then after the first two strokes this way, you start to change the angle of the broom. A couple strokes this way, and then you get on the 90-degree angle, and you are sweeping for effect using the full length. So all of the scratching power or all of the melting power of the entire broom on that angle of attack. And what that will do, according to them, or at least why they're doing it, is they feel that that really changes and influences the direction of the stone, specifically for curling in and finish. So that is sweeping in a nutshell and directional sweeping in a nutshell from the Chicago Curling Club rookies. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have anything, go ahead and add it to the bottom of the screen. There's also links to the Chicago Curling Club videos, so you can take a look at games and see people using these techniques in action or not, and seeing how it is affected. If there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, let us know. Thank you and have a great day.